My husband insisted on a DNA test when I posted a family photo on social media. In response, I handed him the brush I used that morning and said, "Knock yourself out." His sister whispered, "She's hiding something." 3 days later, my mother-in-law locked me out of my own house. My name is Serena. I live in Asheville, North Carolina. I've been married to Colin for 7 years. We have a 6-year-old daughter named Hazel. Before you get the wrong idea, let me be clear, Hazel is Colin's daughter. Biologically, emotionally, spiritually, all of it. But apparently, that wasn't enough. Our life, on the surface, looked normal. Picture perfect even. A cozy 2-story home with hardwood floors and an open kitchen. School art projects taped to the fridge. Wine Wednesdays and the occasional camping trip. But underneath that veneer, there were signs. Cold shoulders. Long silences. Family tension that started out as passive judgment and evolved into something more sinister. It all started with a Sunday photo. That weekend had been unusually calm. Colin wasn't snapping at me. Hazel was dancing around the kitchen while the two of them tried to bake cookies, and I managed to capture a beautiful moment on camera. Colin, smiling. Hazel, giggling, flour on her cheeks. I posted it with the most innocent caption, "Baking day with my favorite people." #family love #Sunday sweetness. I didn't expect that one post to turn my world upside down. The next morning, Colin came home early from work. Which never happens. He walked in looking off. Not angry, not sad, just tense. I asked him what was wrong, and he just pulled out his phone, showed me the photo, and said, "She doesn't look like me." I blinked. Thought I misheard. What? I laughed, trying to break the awkwardness. But he wasn't joking. "Hazel," he said again. "She doesn't look like anyone in my family. And people are starting to notice." People. He meant his sister, Margot. Of course. Margot has always hated me. From the second Colin brought me home, she looked at me like I was a stray cat scratching at the back door. She came from this old Asheville family, country club crowd, everything monogrammed. I grew up in a tiny apartment over my dad's antique shop, got my design degree online, and had no problem rolling up my sleeves. We never matched. She made sure I knew it. So naturally, when I saw her fingerprints all over this sudden accusation, I wasn't surprised. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I didn't even flinch. I walked into the bathroom, grabbed the hairbrush I'd used that morning, walked back, and handed it to him. "Knock yourself out." He took it. Not one word. And from that moment on, everything changed. For the next 2 days, I lived with this horrible tension in the air. Colin was barely speaking to me. Margot kept coming around to check on Hazel, which was a joke. She never paid Hazel much attention until now. On the 3rd day, I left to get groceries. I wasn't gone more than an hour. When I came home, my key didn't work. I stood on the porch in disbelief, thinking maybe I was using the wrong key, or I'd jammed it wrong. That's when I heard the lock click. And saw my mother-in-law, Lorraine, standing behind the glass pane of the front door. She didn't open it. Just looked at me with this smug expression and said, "You don't live here anymore." Then walked away. I stood on that porch with my bags of groceries, heart racing. I called Colin. No answer. Called again. Voicemail. I texted him, "What is going on?" Nothing. I started to panic. Hazel was in there. My daughter. My entire life. And I couldn't even get through the front door. I went to my best friend Anika's house. She lived just a few blocks away and had always had my back. The second she saw me standing there with my groceries and a trembling voice, she pulled me in. "You need to call a lawyer," she said immediately. "This isn't normal. This isn't a misunderstanding. This is something planned." And it hit me. This wasn't about the photo. Or even about Hazel's paternity. This was a setup. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake at Anika's house replaying every moment from the last few months. The weird questions from Lorraine. The snide comments from Margot. The way Colin had been acting, distant, paranoid. Like he'd been fed a narrative and decided to run with it. The next morning, I contacted an attorney. Told them everything. They helped me draft a letter demanding access to my daughter. We prepared a court motion for emergency custody, if needed. Meanwhile, I tried to keep my head above water. Colin still didn't return my calls. And then, exactly 1 week later, he showed up at Anika's house. He looked wrecked. Unshaven. Bags under his eyes. Holding a manila envelope. I opened the door, and before I could say a word, he handed it to me. The DNA test. Inside were the results, 99.9999% match. Hazel was his. He looked like someone had deflated him. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I was just trying to," I cut him off. "No. You weren't trying to do anything but believe your sister and your mother over me." He nodded. He didn't even argue. "You let them lock me out of my house, Colin," I said, my voice shaking now. "With my child inside. You didn't even ask me." And that was when I realized it wasn't about the test. It was about trust. And he had none left. He didn't say much after that. Just stood there on Anika's porch, looking like he didn't know what to do with his hands, or his shame. I could feel Anika behind me, silently watching, ready to intervene if I so much as tilted my head the wrong way. She didn't trust him. And, truthfully, neither did I. "I made a mistake," he finally said. I remember blinking at him, slowly. The word mistake felt so incredibly small compared to what had happened. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk. A mistake is leaving your phone in an Uber. He'd chosen to believe whispers over the woman who built a life with him. He handed over the reins of our marriage to his family like it was nothing. And when they turned it into a witch hunt, he joined in. "You didn't just make a mistake," I said, my voice low and controlled. "You allowed them to treat me like a criminal. You shut me out. Literally. You let your mother lock me out of my own home." Colin didn't try to deny it. Which somehow made it worse. The silence was louder than anything he could have said. "I didn't know what to believe," he mumbled, more to the ground than to me. "Margot said you had a past, someone from college. She swore she saw Hazel's photo and said she looked like him. I thought maybe." I held up a hand. "Stop." He did. Because there's only so many times you can hear someone say they didn't know what to believe before it becomes clear they never wanted to believe you in the first place. "Serena, please," he started. But I was already walking back inside. I left him standing there. Anika closed the door behind me without a word. That night, I finally allowed myself to cry. Not the quiet, composed crying I'd been doing all week. I mean ugly, chest-heaving, soul-draining sobs. The kind that don't ask for permission, they just take over your whole body and leave you raw afterward. I wasn't crying over Colin. I was crying over the version of my life I had believed in. The idea that I was safe, that I was loved, that I was chosen. That Hazel had a stable home. That her father respected her mother. That even when things got hard, we'd face it together. I cried because I realized how alone I'd been for years without even knowing it. Anika held me for a while. She didn't say anything about how right she'd been about Colin's family all along. She didn't remind me how often she warned me about Margot, or how Lorraine always called Hazel that child when she thought I wasn't listening. She just held me. And I let her. Over the next few days, the real consequences began to surface. Colin sent text after text, trying to apologize, trying to justify. Lorraine sent a formal email, saying that she had acted out of concern for the family unit and thought I had stepped out of line. Margot? She went radio silent. Which, for her, was probably strategic. Meanwhile, my lawyer filed a formal complaint about the unlawful lockout and initiated custody proceedings. I wasn't playing games anymore. Hazel needed stability. I needed peace. And if I had to go to war to protect either, then so be it. The court date came quickly. Emergency filings have a way of speeding up the system. Colin looked exhausted. He'd lost weight, his suit hung on him. I almost felt sorry for him, until I remembered the fear in Hazel's voice when I talked to her over the phone while she was still at the house. "Why can't you come home, Mommy?" she asked, her voice tiny. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that her own grandmother believes her existence is a scandal? You don't. You say, "Soon, sweetheart. Mommy's working on it." In court, I kept calm. My lawyer was a beast in heels. We presented the DNA results, the phone logs, the security camera footage from my Ring doorbell. Yes, I kept that up to date. We showed how Lorraine had changed the locks without notice, and how Colin had refused communication during that period. I was granted immediate temporary custody. Colin would get supervised visits. Lorraine and Margot were barred from having any unsupervised contact with Hazel. The look on their faces? Priceless. But the thing about people like Margot is they don't go down easy. The next week, I found out she'd been contacting people from my past. Digging. She tracked down an old friend of mine from college. Sent her messages asking whether I had a reputation. Tried to fish for anything she could use to justify their treatment of me. Fortunately, the people I loved back then? They still love me now. One of them forwarded me screenshots. "She's trying to build a case," Anika said, holding up her phone. "This isn't over for her." I wasn't surprised. Margot never really wanted a DNA test. What she wanted was a reason to erase me. To paint me as a liar, a manipulator, someone unworthy of the life I had. And she almost succeeded. If Colin hadn't handed me that envelope, if I hadn't saved that brush, if I hadn't had someone like Anika in my corner, I might have lost my daughter. Just the thought of it made my blood run cold. But that's the thing about surviving a storm like this, it changes you. You stop waiting to be liked. You stop hoping to be believed. You start preparing for the next hit, and making damn sure you never take it lying down again. And then came the incident at school. That's when everything changed, and I knew I had to draw a line even deeper than I already had. The school incident happened just when I thought things were finally settling. Hazel had been adjusting. Slowly, yes, but kids are resilient in ways that adults just aren't. She had a new routine: drop-offs with me in the morning, a cozy evening at our apartment, her favorite book stacked in a basket by the couch. Every now and then, she'd ask about her dad. And I let her call him, supervised on speaker. I wasn't going to cut her off from him entirely. Not yet. But 3 weeks into our new life, a call came from the school office. "Hi, Mrs. Byrne," the secretary said, her voice clipped and nervous. "We had a situation today." My stomach dropped. Those words are never followed by anything good. She explained that a woman had shown up during recess claiming she was Hazel's aunt and that she was supposed to pick her up early. The staff was suspicious, thank God, and asked for ID. The woman couldn't produce anything official. She got angry, insisted the school was making a mistake, and stormed off. I knew who it was before they even described her. Margot. My hands were shaking when I hung up. I called my lawyer immediately, who advised we file an emergency motion to restrict Margot from school premises. Anika was furious. She tried to take her, Serena. That's not meddling anymore. That's interference. I know, I said, but I could barely get the words out. The fear had settled into my bones now. I spent the night wide awake in Hazel's room, watching her breathe. She had no idea what had happened. I didn't tell her. I just promised her extra cuddles, and she didn't ask questions. Margot had crossed a line. Actually, no, she'd blown the line to hell. And the worst part? Colin didn't even know. When I called him the next morning to tell him what his sister had done, his response was disappointing. What was she doing there? He asked. She tried to pick Hazel up without my permission. Without anyone's permission. She lied and said she had authority. I'm sure it was a misunderstanding. I blinked in disbelief. Colin, I said carefully, she tried to take our daughter from school. Without telling you. Without me. She lied to staff and created a scene. That is not a misunderstanding. There was a long pause. I'll talk to her, he said quietly. But don't blow this up. She's just protective of the family. That word again. Family. As if Margot had ever treated Hazel like hers. As if family gives someone the right to manipulate, to interrogate, to try and steal a child out of retaliation. I hung up without another word. That day, my lawyer filed a motion barring Margot and Lorraine from coming within 500 feet of Hazel. The court approved it. Margot didn't contest. I think even she knew she'd gone too far that time. But I wasn't fooled. She wasn't done, not by a long shot. About a week later, I started noticing odd things. Mail from my lawyer missing from the mailbox. Strange accounts viewing my private Instagram stories. A friend from my old job messaged me, "Hey, just curious, someone from your husband's family called my store asking questions about your employment history? Said they were doing a background check for a job reference?" I hadn't applied for a job in over a year. They were fishing again. Trying to dig up anything they could twist into evidence of instability, unfitness, dishonesty, anything they could potentially use in court or family gossip circles to label me the bad guy. It was like Margot and Lorraine couldn't accept the DNA results. Couldn't accept the court orders. Couldn't accept the reality that I wasn't going anywhere, and that Hazel wasn't theirs to control. Anika said it best, they've been treating Hazel like she's a piece of the family estate. Something to own. Not someone to love. That hurt. Because it was true. To them, Hazel was proof of lineage. A symbol. A legacy. Not a 6-year-old who loved dinosaurs, glitter pens, and bedtime stories. They didn't see her, they only saw their version of what she should be. And now that I'd broken away from their control, they were panicking. They'd lost their grip. But the more they tried to tear me down, the stronger my resolve became. The next major blow came from Lorraine. A letter arrived, hand-delivered to my door by courier. No return address, but I knew that writing anywhere. The letter was 5 pages long. Typed. Double-spaced. And absolutely dripping with condescension and self-righteousness. She wrote about how I'd fractured a proud lineage by keeping secrets. How I'd damaged Colin's standing in the community and embarrassed the family. She claimed I'd weaponized Hazel in a custody battle that I manufactured. That my inappropriate emotional entanglement with Anika raised serious concerns about my mental stability and potential influence on Hazel's development. And then the kicker, she said she and Margot were prepared to pursue alternative custody arrangements through family court if I didn't correct the current trajectory. It wasn't just a threat. It was a declaration of war. I read it 3 times. Then passed it to my lawyer. She read it once and said, they just buried themselves. Because it read less like a grandmother advocating for a child, and more like a manifesto from someone who saw her grandchild as property, and me as the unfortunate squatter. We documented everything. And I stopped taking their calls entirely. But then came a surprise I hadn't expected. Tyler. Colin's teenage son from his previous relationship. The one I'd helped raise since he was 9. He'd been distant ever since things blew up. Caught in the middle, confused, mostly silent. But one night, he texted me. "Can we talk?" I said yes. We met at a coffee shop near downtown, where nobody knew us. He showed up, hair too long, hoodie pulled up, avoiding eye contact. But when he finally looked up, I saw it, guilt. And sadness. And something else too. Protectiveness. Margot said you cheated, he said, flat out. I nodded. I know she did. I didn't believe her, he added, even quieter. Hazel's my sister. No matter what they say. I swallowed hard. Tears stung my eyes, but I held them back. He told me Margot had cornered him at his dad's house. Tried to get him to say things about me, about how I controlled the household, how I was manipulative, emotionally unstable. I told her to off, he said, voice shaking. I said you were more of a parent than she'd ever been. He left shortly after. Didn't say goodbye to his dad. Didn't tell anyone he was coming to see me. Just came. To let me know someone believed me. To let me know not everyone in that family had turned. Tyler's visit was the beginning of a shift I hadn't expected. After that meeting at the coffee shop, he started spending more time at my place. Quiet at first, just playing games with Hazel, helping her with homework, joining us for dinner without saying too much. He didn't talk about his dad, or Margot, or Lorraine. But he showed up. And when a 16-year-old boy makes the choice to show up, especially during a family implosion like the one we were living through, you take notice. Hazel adored him. Always had. And the more I watched him settle into our new version of family, the more I realized something. Colin was losing the only ally he had left. Then came the final unraveling. A few weeks after Margot's failed school pickup stunt and Lorraine's manifesto of a letter, my lawyer called me early one morning. You need to come in. Now. There's been a development. Turns out, during discovery for our custody case, something unexpected came up. Financial records. More specifically, missing financial records. Colin had been hiding money. Quite a bit, actually. A private bank account in his name. One Margot had helped him set up before our marriage. In it were deposits from his company, consulting jobs, real estate transactions, and none of it had ever made it to our joint account or into our marital disclosures. He'd been stashing it for years. At first, I was stunned. Then I realized how perfectly it all fit. Colin had never really trusted me. Not fully. Even before Hazel was born, he was already preparing for a day like this, a day when he might need leverage, control. A day when his wife might decide to fight back. The DNA test, the lockout, Margot's whispers, it wasn't just about Hazel. It was about power. He thought he could take everything. I filed an immediate motion with the court. Presented the hidden financials, submitted everything through my lawyer. The judge did not take it lightly. What followed was a legal reckoning. The court ordered a full forensic audit of all marital assets. Colin was forced to disclose years of hidden income, including business accounts that Margot had helped him squirrel away. She had signed paperwork on several of them. Meaning? She was now legally implicated in marital fraud. The court's ruling? Hazel remained with me, full custody. Colin was granted only supervised visitation for the foreseeable future, pending review after 6 months of consistent attendance and behavior. No unsupervised time. No overnight stays. Lorraine and Margot? Permanently barred from contact. But it didn't stop there. Thanks to the financial findings, I was awarded full ownership of the house, yes, my house, the one they locked me out of, along with a significant share of Colin's assets. The court ruled that because he'd hidden marital income and used family members to manipulate custody proceedings, I was entitled to restitution. It was more than fair. It was justice. The day I walked back into that house was the real moment of closure. It was clean. Empty. Quiet. Colin had moved out the week before per court order. I walked through each room like I was seeing it for the first time. Hazel was with Anika that afternoon, so I had the whole place to myself. And when I stepped into the kitchen, the same one where I'd once handed my husband a hairbrush and told him to knock yourself out, I laughed. Not out of bitterness. But because I had survived it all. A month later, I put the house on the market. I didn't want it anymore. Not because it wasn't mine, but because I didn't need it. I'd already made a home for Hazel and me. One where there was no surveillance, no passive-aggressive family members pretending to care. One filled with warmth, honesty, and peace. The house sold quickly. The market in Asheville was hot, and the equity was more than enough for a fresh start. Anika and I started a small business together, a boutique interior design studio. Word spread fast. My inbox flooded with inquiries. People who'd once whispered behind my back were now asking for consultations. Funny how quickly things change when you take your power back. As for Colin? He faded. The version of him that once tried to destroy me didn't know what to do when he lost control. When his name stopped carrying weight. When his sister's schemes backfired so badly, she was practically persona non grata in every circle she used to rule. Lorraine withdrew. Quietly. She sent one last letter after the ruling. "I hope you're satisfied," she wrote. I didn't respond. Because satisfaction isn't a letter you send. It's a life you live. And Tyler? He stayed. He chose to live with his mom, but he visited Hazel regularly. Came to school plays, stayed for weekend dinners, even helped us decorate our new place. He chose us. Because love, when it's real, doesn't come with conditions. It doesn't need DNA to be proven. And it sure as hell doesn't need to be approved by people who never understood it in the first place. So no, I didn't get revenge with fire or fury. I got it by living. By thriving. By proving that the strongest person in the room is usually the one who was underestimated the longest. And that sometimes, the sweetest revenge is simply being free.